on the indie film level, on that slightly smaller scale, I think a lot of filmmakers think producers are like some kind of sorting machine where you put a script in one side of us and then funding comes out the other side. Whereas producers are real creative collaborators. We're not those sorting machines. We do get involved with the script. We do get involved with casting choices. We do work very closely with the writer, the director, everybody else in the team.
Here we go. Podcast time, everybody. Mike Tech Studios.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the next great episode of the Mike Tech Studios podcast. This is Michael Midnight, and today we're going to do something a little bit different topic-wise. It's actually something of a passion of mine I haven't had a lot of experience in, but our guest has. And the topic is actually going to be for planning, insight, and creative strategy for visual storytellers. With us today is going to be Charlotte Atkinson. She's a producer. She plans and strategic filmmaking guidance for creatives. Charlotte, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am happier to be able to speak with somebody like you just because it's a breath of fresh air for marketing and design, and it allows me to not only get another part of our audience together who are, producers and creative filmmakers to give a little bit of representation, but it's something that, like I said in our intro, it's not really something I get to talk about and deal with every day. So I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to kind of poke and prod your brain a little bit for questions and things of interest that I think our listeners would actually be not only entertained by, but interested in learning more about.
Amazing. Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, the first thing, and I think that's usually the poking and the prodding of who you are as a person, I obviously have to ask, what really got you started on this path as a producer? What really kindled the fire for you to want to do this as your day-to-day?
Oh God, it's so low rent answer. Honestly, it was my mum saying, well, you like watching TV, why don't you work in TV? So I didn't really have this big, passion or dream or anything. Theatre was actually my original passion, mostly because I'm from a theatre family. It's just something I grew up with. And it's, when you're in that world, you're like, cool, this is what I'll do. I got to the age of about 17 and found that it really wasn't my thing. The biggest thing was that I didn't like how, you can spend 6 weeks rehearsing a play and then it's on the West End for 6 weeks and then it's gone. Whereas with film and TV, it's there kind of forever, for good and bad. There are series that I remember watching age like 12 and I still love them and I still watch them. And so when my mum said, why don't you work in TV? And that eventually ended up being film. That was honestly the thing that kept driving me, was the idea that we're making something that lasts and we're making something that is so far-reaching. I've made films with the intention of a very specific audience, and I've had a completely different audience come up to me and say, I loved your film, that meant so much to me. And I think that's the really driving thing. But again, it's not exactly the most exciting answer, I guess.
That's okay. Well, it's a honest answer, but obviously from your accent, from most of us in the US, you're a little bit across the pond there. Where do you hail from and where did you grow up?
I am originally from a very small town in East Sussex, England, which is one of the counties right by the coast. So I was very lucky. I grew up right by the sea. Right now I'm in London, so not a million miles away from home. But yeah, so it means that I tend to do a lot of self-deprecating humor.
That's okay. No, it's just funny because most of our previous guests that I had on recently, they're either Canadians or from London or the UK. So there seems to be like a commonplace of good people or good resources, especially creatives, to reach out to. So that's interesting. Now, tell me more. You said you had grown up from a theater family. That's kind of your bloodline is essentially creatively. Is it something your parents, are they in the industry themselves?
Yeah, my mum is a stage manager. And so obviously I grew up wanting to be a stage manager as well. My dad is a lighting designer. And as much as I love the whole concept of lighting design, it's not something I'm quite clever enough to do. So, I spent a lot of my teenage years playing around with stage managing and lighting as well, school productions and things. My auntie is a drama teacher. She coaches a lot of amazing actors as well. So yeah, it really is a bloodline, like you said.
It seems like it. If this was The Legend of Zelda, you would be like the fourth reincarnation of Zelda right there.
Yeah,
it's
pretty much it.
It's funny that you touch on theater, because when I was growing up in high school, I had a lot of actor artist friends. Either they were in bands, some of them are still performing to this day, smaller venues, because it's just something they do as a passion project, but really good. And then you have other actors, producers, singers, songwriters. I mean, they're just anything from off-Broadway to the likes of Hamilton. But you hit something on the nail as far as for how much behind the scenes work goes on for a production that goes on stage. I mean, we're just stage crew itself is a nightmare that people don't even get to see. If everything goes off without a hitch in a theater play, it's because you didn't see the 45 other people moving pieces of stage and lighting and repurposing for the next scene, and it's flawless. But at the end of the day, it is very much a thankless job. You may go uncredited, you may go unseen or unknown, but you were very integral to that performance being amazing. And you may step up to that and put 110% in it, and the actors might just have an off night and it may not come out as well as it should. That's kind of, I think, where maybe you find a little more levity or forgiveness in the production and film medium. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's kind of the same when you're a producer, for film or TV or radio. On the one hand, you do have a lot more power and a lot more kind of creative input, which is something that I love. But equally, in terms of like the industry's eyes, you kind of are exactly the same level as the stage crew. It doesn't matter where you get to in your career, no matter like how high up you get as a producer, it never really makes that much difference to the industry. There are a lot of producers that I know that are really, really high up, and they don't get replies to their emails. They don't get their scripts read. Despite having many films to their name, it makes no difference if you're a producer. So it's funny that you mentioned that. It feels like I've kind of graduated from stage manager to producer, but honestly, there's not a huge amount of difference in that sense.
Right. It seems like it's more of a title than it is the responsibilities are almost essentially the same. They're just transcending the medium from the platform of being on stage to now being on, some sort of digital film or physical film formats themselves. In my experience, I've had very little actual stage experience. I think the extent that I've done is theater sports and improv acting, which I just remember in those particular situations, even as a producer, in a sense where you're loosely for improv, the show is only really as good as the story, the recommendations from the audience. So if the audience is not really interacting with the experience, it kind of kills the energy and the chemistry of the show. But you're also as strong as your weakest actor. So as a cast, and stage crew, light, everybody, sound, everybody is part of this production. And if somebody falls, especially during a live presentation, if you will, a live show, it shows. You can't hide it. I think it would be a lot more stressful. And even in my experience, again, video short story was the closest I had gotten to smaller little pet projects here or there. And I just remember the video short story teacher really highlighting about how things can change and adjust in the editing process and the post process, and sound really giving that brevity that if you have a good, concise production, clean editing, clean storytelling, sound really just bumps it up. It's I think George Lucas always says sound is 50%, sound is half. I would almost say it's like 75%. The story, if it's good, it's going to be enhanced, but it has to be a good starter. You know what I mean? Like a good recipe for success, especially for a good film.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny, all of these kind of smaller moving parts that we don't really see or hear about or talk about that often. When they're done wrong, it's painfully obvious, And so it is just so crucial having the best team around you. I think in film particularly, there's often this idea that you need to pay someone a lot of money, or you need to get the really expensive people in or get the really expensive equipment or whatever. And really it just comes down to the people and making sure that everyone works really well together so that you never have those glaring errors, whether it's theatre or whether it's film, it's always the same. It all comes back down to the people.
And the ego flare-ups. We don't need, people prancing off scene. Quit. I don't want to work with this guy. He's a knucklehead. It actually leads me into a very good question, we talked a little about this prior to the podcast, but there might be some other insights that you can have some listeners, sort of glean from. As a producer, what are some details that most people either in or outside of the industry overlook? For example, we had spoken about it when you're in a project. A lot of times producers don't actually get paid till well after the film or movie is done or wrapped up. That's when the producer gets paid. What are other really, I think, just glaring bits that people just take for granted?
I mean, it's really good that you use theatre as an example, because only someone on the inside would, it's not like till you go backstage and then suddenly you see all of these things. It's exactly the same with producing, and the same with any role really. But for producers specifically, we are, the first ones in and the last ones out. We often spend upwards of 2 years working on particular projects. The biggest thing that kind of annoys me specifically is usually people are trying to do it in a kind of patronizing way, and they say, oh, you got hired by the director. And it's like, dude, I hired the director and then I hired everyone else. I don't have time for the patronizing thing. Again, on the indie film level, on that slightly smaller scale, I think a lot of filmmakers think producers are like some kind of sorting machine where you put a script in one side of us and then funding comes out the other side. Whereas producers are real creative collaborators. We're not those sorting machines. We do get involved with the script. We do get involved with casting choices. We do work very closely with the writer, the director, everybody else in the team, but we really are the first ones in. So we often develop our own ideas and then get a writer attached, or we pick up a script, and we can spend years and years doing this. And it isn't until you get to production and you actually close your finance that you get paid for however many years worth of work you've done. I mean, if you said, if that was a business proposal, someone would tell you you're an idiot. Yeah, because I can spend, and admittedly it's not just me, it is a producer thing, it's our job, but you can spend 2 years developing a project, getting the script right, securing the funding, but it isn't until you actually get into production and you start shooting that you finally get paid for it. And I think, it's just about having that awareness. As a producer, and before I even became a producer, I was always told, this was just the biggest piece of advice I got from everyone, make sure you understand every single person's job. If you can, work in as many different roles on set as possible so you have that level of understanding. But if you aren't thinking about being a producer and that's not your goal, then it's not common to hear that advice, for someone that wants to be like a sound recordist or something. And I really wish it was, because like I say, when it comes back to the people, if you have that level of understanding for every single role, and it doesn't have to be crazy deep level of understanding, but it just makes everything so much smoother and a lot happier as well. There's a lot less friction when you're able to understand what that person is doing and why it's difficult for them.
Well, I feel that when you are a creative, I mean, any business, it's good to know all aspects and all facets of how things work, because it gives you just a better idea of how things move, right? And I've experienced that. I mean, I think we've all started out at the ground level at some point, and then have worn many hats for different industries, different organizations, or even for our own careers or incentives. Being a creative can be very, very difficult. I do, where I can personally relate, people, I think they take advantage of the fact that if I was a doctor, let's say, for example, you couldn't come to me, check and see if you like my doctoring or my experience or my schooling. Maybe my diagnosis is good, maybe it's not. You kind of want to put one toe in. You don't really want to dedicate or commit. And then you kind of want to see another doctor that might be able to give you the same advice or situation for $5. You go, I'm good. I don't want to deal with it. Even though I've invested your time, we've had an hour session, emails back and forth. I can't really pay you. I don't think that I have to pay. I should have to pay you. And as a creative, we're not getting paid by the hour or paid for a project based on what you think we should be getting paid to solve your problem. We're getting paid to solve your problem. So if it's $5, $500 or $5,000, if it costs us 5 minutes of our time or 5 years, it solves your problem. You may not like that it was done quickly, or it may, have taken far more time than you expected, but it's the same thing. We still, did we help produce your piece? Is it as you desired? Is it up? Is it out? Is it, operational? Yes. Then it's a success. And I think, unfortunately, that people, they miss that mark. They don't look at a 360 view. Sometimes you can be really busy personally or professionally, and you just got that tunnel vision. That's all you can see is that 2 steps ahead of you, or just, as a black box theater production, let's say, for example, something very small and very intimate, you're only worried about that one show if it's just your show. You don't realize if you run a little long, there's 15 other shows that have to go through in that same 2 hours, and somebody has to rush through something else in order to do that. And again, that's a non-paying example, but that sucks. But I mean, even with the smaller projects, what are let's say, what are 2 of the biggest struggles that you found with smaller projects that you're able to turn around with your guidance and experience in the industry?
Oh, you make it sound so elegant. Thank you.
That's my job. You're welcome.
And that's why you're the one in marketing and not me. You make it sound all excellent. Oh, I mean, every film is different. I mean, it's so funny. If you ask a producer, tell me about making your film, everyone has some crazy, wild story, which is always quite entertaining. A kind of classic expression is that if making a film was easy, everyone would do it.
Of course.
And it's right when you're in the middle of making a film, you're like, what am I doing this? The biggest struggles that I've had have usually been either personal issues with people I've been working with, or it's been something related to the script. We had one script, tiny short film, brilliant story, and it was set in this very interesting world where it looked beautiful on the outside, and then as soon as you scratch the surface, there's this kind of cult thing going on anyway. And yeah, it was really fun. And as soon as I read the first page of the script, I was like, okay, we need to shoot this in East Sussex, which is where I'm from. It's that perfect picturesque world. But the director and all of her crew and her cast were all based in Essex, which is a couple of counties away. And so it was a real struggle with locations, because Essex just wasn't full of those sorts of places.
Right.
And so I kept I've got all these images in my head of beautiful farmhouses and, my next door neighbors and that kind of thing. Often it's just about searching for the right look and the right feel, whether that's a location, whether that's a costume, whether that's an actor. You have this very set idea in the script, and being able to actually find it in real life is often quite a time-consuming struggle. It's definitely possible, but it is just about the amount of time that you have available. And guaranteed, as soon as you found the location, it's 3 times the budget you've got.
Yes, of course.
That's the next struggle of negotiating and all of that stuff. But often the biggest struggles happen outside of the script. It usually occurs when you're working with someone who has a different vision for the film than you do. Sometimes it's just plain rudeness and an inability to let go of a script. That's often very common with writers and directors. Mm-hmm. You work on this thing for months and months, or maybe even years. It's a real struggle to let go and let someone else in. But I couldn't do my job properly if I didn't get involved. It's like if someone came to you and said, okay, I have this marketing plan, we're going to do X, Y, Z, I just need you to actually make it happen. You could look at it and be like, this is the worst marketing plan in the world. And, you wouldn't be doing your job properly if you didn't help them fix it and make it better, essentially. And it's the same with scripts. But of course, it's really difficult in how you go about that. Because as I say, a lot of people think producers are just sorting machines. So that's usually the biggest struggle I've had.
Well, it's even in a project management role. I mean, it's professional babysitting between the clients, the vendor partners, in my world of things. Even the board members, everybody gets attached to their baby. So that script is their baby. They've worked on this thing. They've blood, sweat, and tears through years. They don't want anybody to change it. What I have learned in the creative realm of things is you really have to sort it into 2 experiences. Are you creating this piece of art? Because again, if you're getting paid for it or not, you're still creating. That's what you're being tapped to for your talents and your skills. Are you creating this piece of art as a passion project, or are you looking to get paid for it? Did somebody pay you to do it? Okay, they're paying you for your insight, but at the end of the day, you got to give them what they want. And it may not be what you want, and it may just be a mangled mess of what your original vision was. But that's where it comes into a moral conflict of, how much can I let go and be flexible, and how much is it just interference from above that it's really shoehorning in too many things into the script that just don't make sense, shouldn't be there. It's going to blow us over budget. It's out of the creative perception of what the story is about. Does it embellish and help empower the story? Yes. Great. It's the same thing with marketing, and it's difficult to be able to let go. Every project that I put my work into, I put my blessing into, I want to come out successfully. Nobody goes into a project and says, I'm gonna do this halfway and call it a day. I'm happy. No, that's not who we are as people. So when you have 100 people in that area, trying to fight to tweak something to see the best, it's going to go out with their name on it. They want to make sure it goes out well. So I can understand that. And actually that's interesting because that also, I like this. I like how the structure is leading us into the next question. It's
almost like you planned this thing in advance.
I know, right? And here I am thinking we're just sitting here hanging out. No. This is all ad hoc. Shh, don't pull the curtain away. This is all as we go along. It's like a choose your own adventure book.
Of course it is.
No, we like to be prepared. You talked about difficulties sometimes dealing with folks that are working with you or working with the script. How would you let somebody know who is an aspiring producer or a filmmaker themselves? What's your insight on finding somebody truly worth collaborating with? Obviously, specifically for the filmmakers and their selection process for a producer, the director, but this could be anybody personnel-wise that are part of the filmmaking experience.
I think the best advice I've ever gotten on this was from a producer called Harriet Reese, and she said, you have to make sure from the outset that you are working with someone who has exactly the same vision for your film. You have to make sure that you're working towards the same goal. A lot of the little details can change, costumes and cast schemes and locations, fundamentally at this stage, it doesn't really matter. It's just about making sure that you are exactly on the same page with where you want this film to go. And like you say, if your script is your baby, it's really difficult to be able to get out of that mindset of script and start thinking about it as a film. There are scripts that I've read and they read beautifully, but I know that only a fraction of that is actually going to translate to the screen. And so when I come in and say, okay, I think, we've got a really great foundation here, I'd love to be able to build on this so that we get the full impact from the film in the same way that we get the full impact from the script. You do have to make sure that you're open to that. That's again where a lot of things fall apart, is someone saying just flat out no. It's maybe just because I'm quite a lost cause supporter, but I always try and, stay as open as possible for as long as possible. It's very rare that someone will say, why don't we try this out? And I'll flat out say no. If I don't think it's a good idea, I'll say so, but I'm still willing to try it. Unless we've got a really tight deadline coming up or something.
Right.
But if you're not willing at all to, whether you're a writer, director, producer, or just general creative, if you're not willing to have any input and to at least hear them out and experiment with it a little bit, then, you're kind of going to be at the end of the day, you're just going to be left with your script by yourself. You can make a film by yourself, but it's not the best way to go about it. And so if you really see this being a film on screen, whether that's at festivals, whether you're doing an online release, whether it's a feature film and you want to see it in cinemas, you need to make sure that you know what your goal is and that you're collaborating with people that have that same goal and you're all working towards the same thing.
That makes sense. I mean, even I remember with the improv acting factor, if there was a scene that we didn't think was going to work, we had what was called the Olay. So if something was so disastrous halfway through, it just wasn't connecting, it wasn't working out, the characters that we were trying to embody, it just wasn't happening. What the guy just said, hey, Olay, hey, we try it, it didn't work. We try it again, right? We try the scene again, or we just realize it's just not something that's going to connect with the people that are here, with the items that we're trying to convey as part of the experience for those, watching, for the theater experience. We just said, it didn't work. Olay, we move on. Almost like the agree to disagree, factor, for that. Now, for different films and narratives and things like that, even just different film styles, is there a specific film style that you personally enjoy working with, creating within, or even watching if they're different? And if so, why?
Yeah, I'm very specific about the films that I love and the films that I want to make. I think every filmmaker has to get really clear on that. You know, what stories do you want to be known for? No matter if you're just making your first short film or whether you're on your like fifth feature or something, I think if you are really clear in those stories that you love, it makes your life a lot happier because you don't end up with something and you're like, oh, maybe I should have rethought that. Oh dear. But, you know, from the external perspective, it also makes life a lot easier. You know, if I said to you, hey, we're going to go see a Tarantino film, you immediately know roughly what the film is going to be like, even though I haven't given you the title or any other information. And I'm not saying you have to be as like niche down as that, but definitely taking that time to really figure out what you love is so useful. You know, for me, I always tend to love the films that get slated by the critics just because I love the films that have heart to them, you know, and I think that's why I'm really an indie filmmaker through and through. You know, I'm not a studio girl, which is really just because I love that heart to it. And those, you know, it's all about the characters for me. I'm all about character-led narrative dramas usually, and I always go into any kind of meeting by saying, hey, I'm Charlotte. I make films about people fighting for their dreams and then finding clarity at the end of it. It's so funny because I don't even think about that anymore. It's just my kind of filmmaking DNA. And whenever I come up with a new idea, whenever I'm picking up a project, you know, I can look at my slate and without even trying, all of those films fit into that one line.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's so useful because especially when you meet so many people, if you're at an event or, you know, not anymore, but, you know, I've had people emailing me like months and months later and they say, hey, I remember you make films about so-and-so. And even if they remember nothing else about me, it's such you know, it's one short sentence. It sticks in the mind, you know, it's that real elevator pitch for filmmakers.
Right. And it's interesting because that stands out to them and it's your, like you said, your elevator pitch, but it's short and sweet. And they were, you know, Tarantino, you know exactly, well, not always exactly, but I want to say maybe 85% of the time, you know, the tonality and the type of movie that you're looking forward to or looking into. Even when he started to switch around and now become in front of the camera, his characterization is rather iconic. Same thing with Clint Eastwood and some of the bigger, you know, names. But I do find that there's going to be more flexibility even in my world of work with smaller organizations. The smaller the organization, the more flexible they are with trying something different. As you get bigger and bigger, whether it's a bigger organization, medium to large corporation, or in your instance, a studio, they kind of have down pat and set what they want to do, how they want to do it, how they want to pay for it, what the risk is. It's like a cookie cutter setup. There really isn't the heart in the type of content that's going to be created from that establishment. It's not to say that it won't. They're looking for a proven track record for profitable success rather than telling a good story. And I mean, that's the jeopardy that we run into as creatives, where we want to be profitable, but we also want to express our creativity in different ways and not just do the same thing again and again and again and again, because there's no win in that for us. You know, the profit is one thing, but money can only get you so far telling a good story. Same thing with marketing, same thing with a good movie. Now, as you are, you know, we've talked on a couple of producers and directors. Is there a favorite that you, I don't want to say fangirl out for, but that you really enjoy the way that they produce, you know, like a famous producer, or even maybe not, maybe it's a smaller, not so well known producer that you've looked up to or really thought highly of, or really just, I don't know, just really was somebody that you felt inspired by?
I think it would probably be Alison Owen, the producer. I got work experience at her company. Honestly, I'm still, that was like years and years ago, but I'm still very excited that I got to spend a full 4 days at her production company. But the reason that I love Alison and her films is because she has this brilliant blend of quite commercial projects, whilst also being able to tell stories that aren't usually told or don't tend to be favored in the commercial landscape. And they always tend to have a lot of heart to them as well. She did Saving Mr. Banks.
Okay.
2011 Jane Eyre adaptation, the Elizabeth with Kate Blanchett. But, you know, she really prioritizes these female-led stories. The commercial industry, at least, doesn't always tend to favor them. And so I really admire how she has this great blend of stories that she really wants to tell and being able to put them on display for as many people to see. That's often a really hard balance for filmmakers to get. get, like you said, you can have an indie film with a lot of heart, or you can have a through and through formulaic commercial production. There's often not really a middle ground, but I think Alison gets it right.
Well, it's funny because, again, the middle ground is not really movies that you tend to hear about. Those indie films that are really something new or different or exciting is they tried something different and were successful. And of that one success that you hear, nobody hears of the thousands and thousands of failures of other projects that tried something different and failed. But in their eyes, a produced piece is a successful piece. The end. If you were looking to tell a story, you are that much closer to successfully putting a project together, even if it's garbage. You have a project out there. You have a film out there. You have a video shorts out there. That's far closer than the idea guy or gal that says, hey, this would be great for a movie. And that's as far as they throw it out there, and they don't do anything with it. Now, profitability is great, but after a while, it kind of starts getting stale and almost sell outish, if you will. If it pays your bills, by all means. If it's not hurting anybody's ethnicity or creed or beliefs or anything like that, then it is what it is. There are worse things to happen in life. But I know for me personally as a creative, it's burnout, to do the same thing for 10 years, same type of film. You want to try something different, to be known for something different, to just stretch your boundaries to see if you can. If you can't, then hey, I tried. Those type of projects, and you see a lot of actors, they won't actually touch on projects so they're well known unless it's something that really piques their curiosity, unless it's a really good, well-written script or a character that really stands out to them and say, hey, you know what? This is a stretch for me. I haven't really done something like this. Let me try this.
I tend to disagree slightly. I think the reason when you talk about making a film, the reason I disagree is because I don't think making a film is a big enough goal. I wrote something about this yesterday, actually. I have so many people that I work with or have worked with in the past, and I've been following up with a lot of past clients of mine. And, they've released their projects, or they've gotten funding for something, or, whatever it is. But if they've released their film, and they've actually made it and gotten it out into the world, I then always have to push and say, okay, so what were the results from that? Did you get new job offers? Have you gotten funding for your next project? Have you gotten an agent? Like, what's the next thing? And they always stumble a little bit and say, honestly, I was just glad to get it done. And this is really where my role comes in, not just as a producer, but as a coach. I work with filmmakers to transform all of these notebooks full of ideas into sustainable careers. Sustainable as in something long-term, not like using less plastic. It's the biggest thing, because they get so in that whole thing of like, I've just got to make this film. And what happens is they kill themselves for 9 months to make a film, and then they get it out there and nothing. Like tumbleweed, and yeah, it's cool. They maybe got a few views online, or, they went to festivals or whatever it is. But if you haven't actually leveled up, then you haven't actually achieved anything with that film. I mean, yeah, you get the chance to experience, a few different skills, or, work with new people or something along those lines, which is cool, but it doesn't translate to anything in career terms. And so I always have to push people. I don't care if your goal is to make a film. That's not a big enough goal. You need to know why you're doing that, especially, like you said, it's if you're the driving force behind your project, and often you're the only one for quite a long time, making it is not going to be strong enough to actually get it done. Do you want this to establish you as a director? Do you want to launch your YouTube channel with this? Do you want to get an agent from this? Like, what's your goal? Pick something and go for it. So on the one hand, yeah, if you've made something, you are doing better than 90% of the other creatives out there, but you need to know why it is that you're doing it, because otherwise you do end up stuck in this cycle of killing yourself to make a film, and then you're back to square one.
And I think we agree on the same perspectives on that. For me, even in the podcasting world, how many people have you seen that have kind of podcast drift? They start off contents, it's great, and then all of a sudden after, I don't know, less than 20 episodes in, you don't hear from them anymore, and 6 months they kind of just gave up. It's the same thing when you produce any type of content. I don't think, and that, obviously that's why we, spoke and I have you on. There's certain levels of behind the scenes that I don't think people really understand until they're in the trenches. Mm. And they're actually editing, producing. They're actually, oh, wow, I am in this project knee deep. I need to finish it. And some people don't do that. but to get to that point where even if it got nowhere, that is a reference point that they can put as a credit and say, hey, this is a proof of concept of the type of work that I do. And it's a starting point. Now, if it's a career to launch from there, absolutely. Somebody like yourself definitely is going to help them in that direction. But you can't push somebody that is just good enough to, just put out that one piece. That's good enough for them. They're not looking to expand themselves. They exhausted themselves, like you said, in that frame of time, producing that one piece. Do they have the capacity of doing that again and again? Can they evolve their way of thinking to do it smarter, to do it faster, to do it more efficient with better people? What happens when you scale up the budget? Can you still produce it in a timely, effective manner? These are all things that you have to start thinking about as you produce multiple pieces of content. And sometimes, depending on how big the producer or director is, you might be doing these back to back. You might be doing these at the same time. And that's a really mastercraft level of efficiency and really flexibility of your talents. And obviously, how well your network of people that you've brought on for this project can really assist in that, because it's not just one person calling the shots. It is really the flexibility of the entire crew to make it happen. It's really just the executive directors and producers that are steering the ship in that direction of where it should be or needs to be. But, as I'm sure you have emails and inboxes full of folks that have, just dreams, and they don't really know how to go about it. That's where most of their dreams kind of die, is that email. They want to ask a lot of questions rather than starting something, learning. For me, and I'm sure it sounds like, as we've spoke, you as well, we like to be a self-taught person, get in, figure out how something works, ask questions. And as we make the mistakes, figure out as we go along, hopefully not too bad of a mistake, but just you're trying something that you've never done before. If you want to learn, you learn from the bigger people that have done it successfully. You pick their brains, you see what works, what doesn't work, but try and do something yourself. I have found, and this is just me personally before we, have spoke, I find a lot of people have a lot of great ideas in different industries, video game projects, podcasting, indie movies. I have this great idea for the next movie, but that's as far as they ever take it. You never see anything beyond the couple of napkin scratches on the, notes on the napkin type procedure. If you can nurture that interest into something that could be a full-fledged profitable career, then awesome. What would be something that folks that are producing content and maybe just not getting the headway that they're looking for, or the eyes on their content, what's something that you would say to them if they're listening now to motivate them to keep going or to think bigger?
You really need to change how you're operating as a filmmaker. And that's a pretty painful answer. I probably wouldn't like it if someone said that to me over a podcast. But the reason I say it is because as soon as you make that change, everything else changes with you, and you get out of that cycle. And I ran this masterclass series last week, we spoke about it, and I said, I spent a full day talking about how you need to go from cycle to ladder, which sounds insane, but when you think about it, instead of going around that crazy cycle from this one film that's going to establish you as a director, cool, that's the first step on your ladder. Next step is going to be working with bigger budgets and proving to financiers that you're capable of working with bigger budgets. That's project 2. It's all of these little stepping stones. And so as soon as you change the way that you are operating as a filmmaker and you get out of that one project at a time focus, everything else is going to change with you, because suddenly you're picking your 2-year goal, and it might be to be screening your first feature film at a festival as a director. I don't know, pick a goal and go with it. And you know where you are now, and you're able to break that down into stepping stones. So you need to direct your first short, and then direct a larger scale short film, and then get the script together for your feature. You can break it down into those manageable chunks. And when you start thinking about that, long term, life changes, honestly, because you're no longer just working on this one project on a small scale, in your downtime. You suddenly have a whole 2-year plan for your career. I'm still hitting those targets that I set for myself, way back in October when I picked out my next 2-year goal. I'm still hitting those stepping stones because I know that system of pick your goal, work out the stepping stones, job done. I make it sound quite simple, but honestly it is. It's different for everyone. So, it's not like there's a cookie cutter kind of path to follow. But once you start following that system, you have a career. You don't just have a project.
I like the visualization instead of going round and round on the track, that you're actually on a ladder rung going up, your next move, your next move, your next move, and it being a carefully considered sort of precise, the precision in it and moving forward rather than just chasing your tail, next project. I think that really helps in changing your perception of how you do it. If this is what your passion is, nobody's going to tell you otherwise. They can help you, but nobody's going to tell you what is going to be success for you at the end. And, they can help you bloom up and get bigger. But I just feel that, especially in this time right now, folks are really reevaluating their life, their lifestyles, their work ethics, maybe their career path, their industries, their directions, maybe just their to-do list, things they haven't really checked off yet. That's why I have a variety of different guests on that is a timeless experience, regardless of what's going on in their life, age-wise. There is little nuggets of information that you can glean from that. Mm-hmm. That allow you to get on that next rung rather than chasing your tail. And at some point, you're going to end up popping in neutral. You're going to exhaust yourself. You're going to lie down and you've never made it off that track, where if you take a breather on a ladder and you're climbing up, you've climbed up 13, 14, 15 rungs and you take a little rest, you're still up. You're still elevated. You're still moving towards that next goal, that next plateau. You have that 2-year goal set out for yourself. Boom, you're there. Now, where's my next 2 years? And it's not going to be perfect. Though one of the rungs might be a little, mildewed. You might get a little tired and go to grab it and it breaks. That's what happens. It's life. But at least you're that much further away than just literally on the same plane. So
yeah.
I really enjoy that. Charlotte, I appreciate your time. You can find Charlotte on Instagram on Charlotte Produces. You can definitely check in and connect with her on Facebook. She has Facebook Live sessions like how to pitch to producers that she did today to help other creatives. You can check out her content, her classes and services directly on charlotteproduces.com. She also has a sign up on her website that you can get to for an easy to read producer's checklist. You just put in your information and that goes out to you as well if you're interested. But Charlotte, I really appreciated your time and stopping in to talk with us and being a guest on the show. Really, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
The Mike Tech Studios podcast, your source for design, entertainment, marketing conversations, and content. Amazing guests, tips, humor, and stories available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and your podcast app of choice. This has been a Mike Tech Studios production.